this book is called Dzogchen, Heart Essence of the Great Perfection by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And it's based on a series of teachings he gave on the three words of Jampel Dorje, which is traditionally held to be the first Dzogchen teaching. So in particular, there's a sort of a more recent commentary, older than the Dalai Lama's, which is called Striking the... What is it called? It was given by Patrul Rinpoche, so that would have been in the 19th or 20th century, I believe. And I'm not sure if I can find the name of the actual commentary, but it's actually available on lotsawahouse.org if you'd like to see it. And the three words that strike the vital point are basically exposing the ground, path, and fruition of Dzogchen. And to me, at least from what I understand, these three words are really, it was able to bring Jampel Dorje's student to awakening. So I think it was Sri Simha or Manjushramita, I think. Maybe I can look that up real quick. But I think in some ways that's really all you might ever need to practice Dzogchen. Because to me, even it's present within even the first
Manjushramita, yep.
Manjushramita. Okay.
And Padmasambhava, really.
Oh, I thought Padmasambhava was a student of Manjushramita. Or Sri Singha.
Sri Singha was technically Padmasambhava's teacher, but also Gaurav Dorje. And then Sri Singha also went to Vimalamitra and to Vairocana. And Vairocana went to King Trisandetsen. And this was all sort of around Samya Monastery. Around the time of Shantarakshita too, and Vimalamitra, who got the teachings from Padmasambhava. At least that's how I have it sort of, for some reason, remembered like that. But Sri Singha, as far as I know, taught Vairocana, Vimalamitra, and Jhana Sutra.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in any case, Sri Simha was the second. Jampel Dorje was supposed to have been taught Dzogchen from Samantabhadra, I think it is. And then
yeah, which is just the great perfection itself, right? So it's a sort of almost like a term, I guess. But...
And then when he took Manjushramita as his student at some point, and when he was dying, Manjushramita said, "How will I ever remember all the teachings you gave?" And I guess from the sky there was kind of a great light, and a golden casket was passed down, and Manjushramita opened it, and inside of it were just these three words that are the vital point of Dzogchen. And and this is just my opinion, but to me, even the three words are also encapsulated within the first word, But anyways, that's just some background on the text. And I think this is starting off at the first. This is starting off at the first word. Yeah. Oh, so the name of the commentary from Patrul Rinpoche is The Special Teaching of the Wise and Glorious King. But anyways, let me continue. So this is from the point that says the verses. Emma, phenomena are, without exception, perfect within the continuum of self-arising Rigpa. Now, the verses begin with Emma, an expression of wonder, for none of the phenomena of samsara and nirvana are, in their ultimate nature, things that are suddenly and newly created through causes and conditions. Their natural state is one of primordial and natural perfection within the continuum of self-arising pure awareness. That is, they are all embraced within its expanse. In the lower sense, the phenomena of samsara depend on ordinary mind, while in the higher sense, the phenomena of nirvana depend on rigpa. According to the newer schools of Vajrayana in Tibet, the fundamental innate mind of clear light is termed Shugatagarbha, or Buddha nature. Actually, Dawei, could we talk briefly about, in the lower sense, phenomena of samsara depend on ordinary mind, while in the higher sense, phenomena of nirvana depend on rigpa? Could you disentangle that?
Yeah, I'm having slight audio disturbances here. Could you repeat what your question was?
Yeah, the sentence is, in the lower sense, the phenomena of samsara depend on ordinary mind, while in the higher sense, the phenomena of nirvana depend on rigpa.
Well, it's kind of a play on words because there is no interdependence when you're dealing with Rigpa. So, just from my interpretation, uh, in order for phenomenon to exist at the relative level, which I imagine lower sense can correlate with, um, ordinary mind has to construct those, right? Just like in a dream, we construct phenomenon. So we can agree on the first part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in a higher sense, the phenomenon of nirvana depend on Rigpa. I would say that without hearing this to its completion, um, this has to do with the self-liberation of phenomenon.
Yeah.
This because that self-liberation happens within Rigpa, right?
Yeah. No, I was thinking about it from the perspective of cessation, which would depend
Yeah,
on rigpa.
yeah. That's the only way I can make sense of it because really there is no interdependence in Rigpa, right? We've heard that plenty of times.
Mm. Okay.
So that's my best, but who knows? Maybe we'll get more clarification as we go here.
Yeah. Thank you. Continuing. According to the newer schools of Vajrayana in Tibet, the fundamental innate mind of clear light is termed Shugatagarbha, or Buddha nature. In the textual sources of the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, it is referred to as uncompounded clear light. This term, uncompounded or non-composite, can be understood in various ways. More generally, it means something that does not depend on causes and conditions. But it can also signify that which is not contrived as something temporary and new, and so something that is primordially present, a continuous and permanent state. Take, for example, the enlightened activity of Buddhahood. The ornament for clear realization refers to it as permanent, that is, some continuous permanent state. But it is in the sense that this activity is without interruption that it is labeled permanent. In this quote, Thus, since its enlightened deeds are so vast, Buddhahood can definitely be described as pervasive. And since those deeds are not subject to degeneration, they can in fact be described as permanent. So I think here he's describing the fact that the mind of clear light, which is that synonymous with Rigpa Dawai, the Shugata Garba. But he's describing how it is uninterrupted, uncompounded, non-composite. So it's not part of the, like we talked about before, it's not part of the interdependent aspect of normal phenomena within the samsaric mind, where things appear to be completely dependent on one another. Rather, it's out kind of not it's not that. It's kind of all pervasive in that it's not dependent on anything. Similarly, clear light is primordially as it is. It is beginningless and not contrived as something new. It is something that abides continuously or permanently. That is one way of interpreting the term uncompounded. Such
Oh,
terms.
excuse me. Um, it may be talking about as the display of Rigpa.
What is that? The clear light of clear mind?
Well, no, the we're talking about the ultimate and the relative
Oh,
sense there. I think the quote was about ordinary mind and in the
oh yeah,
higher sense phenomenon of nirvana
yeah.
depend on Rigpa. It could mean that Tuji in Tibetan, the display of Rigpa, right? The responsiveness. But yeah, please go on. I didn't mean to interrupt there, but something to consider.
Hmm. No, sure. I did want to ask too, is the mind of clear light synonymous with Rigpa? Shugata Garba?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, totally.
Makes sense. It is something that abides continuously or permanently. That is one way of interpreting the term uncompounded. Such terms need to be understood in context. For example, some scholars state, all that exists is necessarily compounded. This is to be understood in the sense that things are, of necessity, put together on the basis of concepts, and from that point of view, are compounded. And I think when he says this, he's talking about ordinary things like you would point to an object in your field of vision, and you might say that's a bookcase, or that's a desk, or that's a window frame. To kind of have those objects, there needs to be a structure where, oh well, windows go in walls, bookcases have drawers, or bookcases have shelves, desks have drawers, that sort of thing. So it's compounded from these interdependent relationships with everything else, all the other objects in your mind. Yet, self-arising Rigpa is beyond ordinary consciousness altogether. Concepts such as compounded or uncompounded, originating or ceasing, are still part of the concepts of the ordinary mind. Since the nature of self-arising Rigpa is beyond the ordinary mind, the conventions created by our ordinary consciousness will be at odds with it, for Rigpa is beyond all imagining or expression.
Yeah, just to step in on that and share a little bit. You can, in the most subtle ways, have conceptual imputations, and like Jampel was just saying. we need these sort of fundamental conceptual constructs to build upon. And I've always thought that things like primitive shapes, basic shapes, are foundational. As our perception, our mind creates those, And then we have these sort of binary constructs, and very much like computers, we have assembly constructs, right? And then the surface programming there that runs on it all. And that entire sort of iceberg of programming can be okay, Jampel, no problem. But that we can think of it as an iceberg, right? At the very top, we have all these thoughts about the bookcase, as we're using for an example. We call it a bookcase. We may have had that passed down to us from family, so we cherish this bookcase, and there's stories about it. So it has a real life there, And underneath, though, we have all kinds of other stuff like creating and organizing shapes and colors, and building upon all these conceptual stories, but also our own identity that we're reifying through creating this bookcase. Now, that's not to say without grasping, we can still build the bookcase, right? Or have the bookcase and admire it and enjoy it. But here it's important to understand that there's a dimension of your mind free of all those concepts. It doesn't require a single one. Yeah. And even in the most subtlest ways, we can imputate what we think reality is looking like or what's going on with reality.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? All right. So, continuing. The Dalai Lama says, personally, I find this topic of considerable interest. And the reason I am explaining it is because of the statement made by many scholars that the four schools of Tibetan Buddhism, Shakya, Geluk, Kagyu, and Nyingma, all meet at a certain point with the same intention. This statement has aroused controversies as well, and is the subject of some debate. But it would seem that those scholars who say that there is this point of identical intention where all the schools meet are saying so because there is, in fact, such a point, not just for the sake of hearing the sound of their own voices. I give a lot of thought to this question, and I mention it because of my personal interest in what is a fundamental issue. True, different vocabularies are used to discuss this, and each school has its own unique interpretations. But these are individual ways of drawing out this truth, and each has its own internal consistency and meaning that can bring you to an extraordinary level of understanding. In the Guhya Samaja cycle, the self-arising wisdom of Rigpa is termed the fundamental innate mind of clear light. The Kala Chakra cycle speaks of it as the all-pervading Vajra space. And in the Havadra Tantra, its explanatory tantra, the Vajra Ten, and related texts, it is referred to as precious mind, as in the following verse. Other than the precious mind, there is no Buddha, no ordinary being. In the Dzogchen tradition, the term Tamo Gya Shepa, ordinary awareness, is used, and often Rigpa, pure awareness. Dawei, can you talk about ordinary awareness? Is there any special significance to that being used in Dzogchen texts? Because that seems at odds with sometimes the speciality of Rigpa.
Well, eh, for a while there, certain translators were using ordinary mind to describe uh, your enlightened mind, and I really prefer that translation myself. Actually, Togo Organ Rinpoche was a proponent of that translation, and I think it's popular in Mahamudra. Although I've I'm not as familiar with Kagyu. I've spent relatively little time with the Kagyupas, so I'm not sure, but I think it may be standards in many Kagyu traditions that ordinary mind is used. And to me, it's great because when you relax and you release um, fixation and preoccupation and all this, it feels like you're home, your mind, you know. And so for me, that word is great, and it also makes it a lot more accessible to people, in my opinion. Where some of these other words can sound like unobtainium, right?
Hmm.
But here also Yeshi's citing where ordinary awareness it sort of defines it, right, as Rigpa, pure awareness. Yeah, and then it says made of terms such as Rangdro, Teradro, and Sangda, self-liberating, nakedly free, and unobstructed. Mhm. Yeah, so that's what's great. The translators have a great advantage, and those people who can speak the Tibetan language do too. Sometimes we get left with one translator's preference, and if we have good translators, then they really give us everything. Like here, I feel like they're trying to really just get us to understand the underlying meaning, you know. And the Dalai Lama is known for that. He's like a secret enigma, almost, because he always finds ways to connect the dots and unify things. And there have been a few Buddhist teachers who have been like that that I really admire for doing that. Bhikshu uh, Venerable Wahula Rapula is another one. He was able to make a bunch of correlations between terminology in the Pali Canon with Yogacara and with Dzogchen, which is pretty amazing. So I've always appreciated that those who aren't so strict with their definitions and translations, who can stick a couple different ones in there so we can understand a little bit more nuanced aspects of this stuff, you know?
Yeah. Um, yeah. And I mean, to me at least, it helps to come at it from different angles because I don't know. I guess
Well, it's more accessible that way, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
we have a larger vocabulary to choose from and
Hmm.
more terminology to choose from, and
I
really, Dalai Lama is great at getting to the heart of the meaning.
yeah.
But yeah, if you want to use the word ordinary mind or ordinary awareness, I think it's a great translation. Um, you may find a couple people out there that butt heads with you about it and say, no, 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 ordinary mind is sem, you know, um, enlightenment is semni, you know, it's not ordinary and all this. But
Yeah. I guess it seems contextual to me too because in the last page he does give the comparison of ordinary mind with samsara. that says the phenomena of samsara depend on ordinary mind. But I've also heard, I think Toku Ergen used the phrase ordinary mind to refer to Rigpa, in as it is.
Well, keep in mind that uh, here we're sort of in the context of
Yeah,
po- pointing out, right?
yeah, okay. I think that's the thing that kind of like it was troublesome for me approaching this is that every teacher kind of uses context different contexts sometimes, and sometimes they'll move into different contexts to
Hmm.
explain things. And not knowing the Tibetan, I mean, it definitely seems like you said different translators are sometimes idiosyncratic with how they'll use certain terms, and then
Hmm.
especially you get people online who are really upset by different terminologies and descriptions. So it's like,
Hmm.
yeah. But
Yeah,
I
and I. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say personally, I find that like following a teacher through and getting a thorough understanding of what they're saying is more valuable than trying to connect all the different terminologies. And then once you attain kind of an understanding, you can see how what they're saying and how they teach connect with how others do it too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're here to help do. You know, those of us who have been in Dzogchen a little bit longer, uh, we can just continue to use this same lingo and make it accessible, you know? And that's pretty much my only purpose sometimes in this group is just like decoding and paraphrasing some of these things to use the lingo that we're familiar with. And yeah, a lot of these translators get very fancy too sometimes. But what's great is that it's almost like the old masters, they planned for this because they repeat things in a way that it's difficult to really get it wrong. So it'll repeat uh, the that the main point is that awareness is the basis for samsara and nirvana. You know, that's the main point.
Okay. And
Okay,
Michael
so
says the variety of terminology and translations is a great source of confusion for me. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, unless you had something else to say, I was going to say I can just continue.
Oh yeah, totally. And if there's particular terminology that anybody wants to sort of uh, put into question, whether it's the comments or just sort of chime into the microphone, I'll be happy to relate these. Basically, the main point of these three words is to recognize the awareness nature. Awareness is a sort of field that you can notice, just like you can notice space. It's always here, and we're in it, and it's right in front of us. But it's very easy to ignore space, even though it's pervasive and everywhere. We really kind of ignore it. In the same exact way, we tend to ignore this awareness that's actually in this text very boldly being called permanent. That's a maybe that's a sort of Sutrayana influence or Semdi influence, but and I can understand their point. I stay clear of that word when it comes down to awareness, but either way, it is unchanging. It's pure consciousness, ultimately ineffable beyond our 1,022,000 words in the English language. So uh, we have to sort of surrender to it a little bit for that revelation beyond our spectrum of sort of conceptual thinking. We have to continue to come into awareness, familiarize with it, and really, concepts are great, concepts are fun, but you cannot use them to access this field, this cognizant field, this uh, this basic space. So recognizing that and familiarizing with it to the point where there's a confidence there that it even starts small, but it's like a spiritual confidence, for lack of better words, that supersedes everything, and it's quite wonderful. The mind starts to experience true liberation, and they compare it to like a bird that cracks out of the eggshells and starts to fly. It can be quite wonderful. So, no matter what this text says, it's about recognizing awareness, being familiarizing with it, integrating your experiences into it, and then uh, eventually effortless abiding and with a level of comfort and confidence. And it emphasizes self liberation. So, all these everything that this text is talking about has to do with really to have faith that self liberation uh, is sort of the key to enlightenment, because there are thoughts that used to take you into a production cycle. There are thoughts that used to captivate you or even catch you being reactive and judgmental, whatever. And now these thoughts just come and go. That is observable psychological proof of programming being liberated. So it's quite fascinating, actually, that we have the ability to do this, but one has to trust awareness, you see. One has to really get comfortable with it, be consistent enough with your familiarization stage, sort of that second stage that we have here, so that you can really, it's the difference between when you have your feet in the ocean and now you have one in the sand, but you got to really go all the way into the ocean here, and that's what familiarization is all about, and integration, because every state of consciousness that you have, whether you're rigid and mad or relaxed and joyful, whether you're sick, whether you're in a coma, it's all within awareness, you see. So you end up completely submerged into the ocean of luminous, compassionate cognizance. It's a wonderful ineffability that we can access here.
Everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Um, yeah, so the point that you were making about kind of proceeding with confidence is what I've sort of resolved to do about this. Like, I have these experiences of consciousness, and I'm, asking myself, like, is that Rigpa? And then I read these texts, and it, mentions things like clear light and luminosity and all this stuff. And it's like I find myself asking myself, like, okay, would I describe this experience as like quote clear light? And it's like, well, I don't know what that means, and no, I wouldn't. But that's kind of what I was stuck on for a long time. And so what I've sort of resolved to do is just say, like, okay, even if the words don't match exactly what I would use, like, I'm gonna call this that and keep going.
Well, don't do that. Don't just call it something if you don't see it, though, right?
But like the way that I would use the word ordinary, I don't know what like meaning is getting infused into like what experience I'm supposed to be having. Um,
Right. Well, let me clear before you go too deep. Let me ask you something. When you sit here with your eyes open, can't you sort of perceive space?
Yeah.
And does it have a clear light to it?
I think my problem is that the word light is too conceptually laden for me to like light is visible, visible means not clear. And so I can't but I get the idea that like I would call it the fact of seeing and the fact of experiencing. Um,
Hmm.
that's what I like. That's what I map clear light to in like the experiences that I have.
Okay, that's understandable and totally legitimate. But like I said, even if we sit here with our eyes open, or even if they're closed, there's a sort of almost like a white noise. And even with when they're open, see facts of experience and things like that. We're describing. There's no facts of the mountain. You just see the mountain, right? There's no fact of the mountain. You see it and you can describe the mountain. Well, in the same way, here in your experience, you can see. It's almost like a luminosity when you look at space. And you start to not see with your eyes, but really come into a fully mentally embodied. And your mind is part of everything right now. There's a cognizance is part of everything. And
Yeah,
so, oh, yeah, go ahead.
cognizance is what I map like the clear light to. Like when I read clear light, I map that to like the experience that I call cognizance. That's what I mean by like
Yeah.
the fact that.
But can you bend just for the sake of having a common ground? Do you, like in your experience, do you see that luminosity? Or do you experience it?
Uh, I don't know. So like if I close my eyes, you described it as noise sometimes, but I just kind of assumed that that was something like that my eyeballs were just doing and not like consciousness. But maybe.
Right. Well, that's why when we have our eyes open and let's just pay attention to space for 10 seconds. Can you sort of see space? Yeah or no?
I don't. I don't know. I see stuff, and I see volume and distance and depth.
Well, volume. We're talking about seeing actual space. You can sort of see it, it almost has a glimmer to it. It's very difficult to describe what you see when you look at space. Anybody else want to chime in on what they see when we put that proposition up in the air? What do we see when we look at space? I totally can relate to Michael. And we just read from Dalai Lama that said concepts will never be able to touch Rigpa. They're just inherently at odds.
But
But
I
on
feel
a conventional level, I'm trying to maybe draw some correlations here so that for the sake of dialogues and things.
I feel like there's an idea of space. So you might look at a spot in the air above you, maybe to the left a little bit, and you might think that there's kind of a location to space, or there's a certain amount of it. But like to actually kind of it's almost like to look at the space itself is to not be separate from the space. It's to actually cognize the space itself. And to me, that is touching Rigpa. So the space itself is empty, right? So when you cognize that space, there's like emptiness there. I guess everything is kind of empty. So when you fully cognize it, you touch emptiness, but space
Well,
is a good illustrator.
Yeah, but the thing here is that we can picture it like we're in a volume right now, and if we think of it scientifically, space is the volume, right? And space is clear, but maybe this is part of Togya stuff, I don't know, but you can sort of see it. And so the volume, what is really the volume in Dzogchen? It's cognizance. It's a sort of womb, like a container of cognizance. What is cognizance? It's just like space. It holds everything. Everything happens within this volumetric field of cognizance. And that's what's so great about in physics, maybe awareness is just one of these unified fields uh, that they say fundamental particles arise from these, right? From these fields. So, like the physicists have also found when they studied empty space, they found that there's a field there with the infinite potential for all fundamental particles. So to me, this sounds exactly like awareness, actually. Um, Awareness is like a field, and it's cognizant, sort of white noise. And that white noise is infinite potential. And just like you can excite or vibrate fundamental particles into being, I think it's quite reasonable to entertain that. Well, what if we're just really vibrating this all into being? With our cognizance, it's a response to our cognizance. So within the volume, since it is a volume, it's not going to be like a two-dimensional screen with pixels. The pixels are going to be everywhere now. They're all over the place. And from each pixel holds the infinite here. So this volume is what we actually start to familiarize with. It's a cognizant volume. And some call it clear light because it's sort of with your mind, if you bring your awareness behind your eyes and you start to see with your mind. Because again, the eyeballs, even according to modern science, do very little. The brain is the mind is constructing the reality.
So
Huh?
you're saying that awareness is not localized. It's
Exact.
equipresent or whatever it is. Equipresent, ever present, maybe
Omnipresent, maybe.
omnipresent. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I think you get that. It's like a volume. Yeah. Michael also want to say.
Yeah, that I definitely get. Like the idea of there's volume, and both that volume and my perception of that volume are things happening in mind. And that, like when I feel like I'm looking directly at mind, that's the experience I'm having is
Well,
looking at this
actually,
space where that volume
mind is the
is.
volume. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, is that what you mean?
Yeah. So like earlier when I made the comment about like something my eyes are doing, like you can close your eyes and take your fingers and push on your eyeballs and like make stuff happen.
Mm-hmm. But that's still within the volume like awareness. You see, you should still be able. I mean, definitely not at the beginning, and that's not going to be apparent. But if I sit here and I push it on my eyeball right now, there's still this sort of cognizance that that's happening within.
If you didn't have eyeballs and the
Yeah.
lights that I see with eyeballs, you wouldn't. So that can't be
What do you mean? When we dream, when we go to sleep, we have a visual consciousness there. You see, is mind. We don't need the eyeballs to see. We need the eyeballs to see this collective reality, of course. But seeing is not inherent to the eyeballs, it's inherent to the mind. That's why when you bring your awareness behind the eyes, think of an apple, think of a carrot, think of a banana. I got fruits on the mind. But that's happening sort of within your mind's eye.
Yeah, that's I see the mind as a container for experience and perception. If we
Yeah.
had if we had like, we have our senses, and there happen to be five or six or seven or whatever, but there could be more. In any other senses that we had, any information that we got from those that we would experience, that experience is happening in mind.
And at the end of the day, although we sort of introspective scientists here, we like to discuss these things, but the more you come into just naked cognizance that sits there almost like a security camera and just watches everything. No matter what thoughts you have, you remember them because awareness was there. Your whole day was within this volumetric sort of cognizance that just sits there uh, unchanging. It's been there since we were babies. It was there while our bodies were, some intelligence was growing our bodies, you know? So to recognize that cognizant aspect, that naked, unconditioned aspect of the mind, is what Dzogchen actually hinges on.
Yeah, anytime I see like primordial or unified or timeless, that's how I map that. Like, it's the thing that was always there when my eyes were open, closed, asleep, awake.
Yeah,
That's
right. Exactly. Okay, well, I think we're good on the reading, huh? It's about top of the hour, and I had a nice little Dharma talk with that. It's like having cake with your coffee. Huh. So, any final thoughts about the text or anything in the discussion?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you for the Dharma talk, both of you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for helping me sort through that.
Yeah, and thanks, Jampel, for reading. Uh, I know sometimes we're tired and da da da, so appreciate it. And also Yeshi for recording, and everyone for being here for the Dharma talk. Even if you're just listening, just chilling, presence is a present. So yeah, it was very enjoyable and great to be here with you all again.
Dawei, I don't know if this is a good question or not, or if this is a degenerate question, so I apologize in advance. But if somebody were to watch this video and listen to the instructions you gave Michael and were to understand Rigpa, would it be a valid pointing out instruction?
If they actually had a realization from our talk,
Yeah.
yeah, well, in order for them to have an authentic realization from our talk and pre-recorded video, they would have to have some previous circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as a brand new person that knows nothing about meditation or dharma, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but probably a lot less likely.
I guess the interesting thing I feel like is for somebody to even be interested in something like this, they probably have some kind of circumstances from previous situations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why you never really know. That's why a lot of these great masters, they give the pointing out instructions all the time whenever they feel somebody's receptive. But another person, you could have the most deep spiritual conversation and then bring up awareness, and they can't even stop for a moment to recognize what you just said. They just immediately goes into thinking processing. Of course, there might be underlying blessings that happen, things that happen outside of our surface level. But it's quite interesting today, actually, when I was working. There's a lady, and she really likes to talk to me while I'm working. So, uh, she had just been talking for a while, and she was like, "Everything's always changing, and that's this and this, and it's changing and changing." And I said, "Well, not awareness." And she said, "She said, well, awareness is in your perceptions," and then she kind of just immediately goes into the thinking mind.
Huh.
But she's an absolute sweetheart. But I'm just saying how she's like 75 and really cool to talk to actually. But yeah, we're dealing with recognizing something outside of the thinking mind here. So in a way, it segregates us as practitioners. Because in one aspect we're together, we're unified with everybody, and actually hearing that woman talk and just listening probably helps her a lot, just having a talk with her and actually working on her land. I guess it's been a delay. So I feel like I'm doing dharma work here, um having conversation with somebody and things like that. So definitely not useless or anything, but as far as us meeting on the basis of spacious awareness, only people that really have recognized it and then followed up by familiarization, only those folks can really see you. And they can see you. Like if you saw somebody in a store who was an awareness holder, you probably would know. It's pretty interesting.
How can I make myself more receptive to pointing out instructions?
Excuse me?
I was asking how I could make myself more receptive to pointing out instructions. I feel like when they happen, they don't always elicit anything.
I feel like you had some clarification when we were just speaking. Am I right or no?
Yeah,
So I think you're doing just fine. It's not going to be a hunky dory little thing, that you can smooth out. Um, Generally speaking, in my experience, pointing out like 50% of the time has been rough for people. It's like I've challenged their minds and challenged them a little bit, and you know, uh, but not as bad as Patro Rinpoche got. He got pulled around by his hair, and spit on. So I doubt you're more stubborn than Pato Rinpoche or Milarepa, right? Building 13 houses. If you do build 13 houses, come out here in the Mesa, though. We need some houses over here. Kitty. But yeah, I think you're fine. Yeah, that you may just be going a little bit tough on yourself there.
so should I if the instruction is to look into space and look to see clear light, and I take that away and I go and meditate, like is that how I should approach it? Should I like look and try to find that?
Well, I would consider that familiarizing. If you feel inspired to have a sit, I'd do that before and after. It's just you get in a zone sometimes, and you just run with something. But I encourage you to get your thinking mind out of it because, just as a matter of science, you gave me a conceptual answer to an experiential question. So whenever that conceptual mind gets in your way, try to come back almost like a person whose head has been hollowed out. They have no brain, right? Or a newborn baby, uh, and they go into the ocean. There's not a single thought that they're going to have as they walk into the ocean. It's going to be, let's just pretend they could walk, but it's like that. We can come in with this very clear, thoughtless observation or recognition. And you and I was challenging you a little bit there because clear light uh, is it's important. Awareness is important. Okay, awareness and clear light are inseparable. Um, but I think if you're comfortable enough with what we're calling awareness, and you understand what that looks like, then clear whether you see clear light or not, to me is mm, maybe secondary, but perhaps there is no enumeration here. All I'm saying is that it wasn't vital for me for you to see clear light, but now that you're on it, look for it, right? And the best way is to begin to sort of perceive, sit here thoughtless in your own mind, in the space of your own mind, free of thoughts. And then even if you close your eyes, open them, you know, put your there's always this sort of cognizant field, and it has a
Oh,
hmm?
that did it.
That did it.
Yeah.
All right, way to go. Did you have
Okay.
a aha moment?
Yeah. You saying that awareness and clear light are inseparable, and then the idea of the cognizant field.
Right on,
Yeah.
man. I feel it
Yeah.
now. Yeah, I feel it. You did have a aha moment, didn't you? Very good. I wasn't expecting that. Very cool. Now you have something different to take away from the group. You just recognize the nature of mine, brother. So my advice is everybody's got this crucial fork in the road as soon as this happens. Um, Samsara sort of pulls you back, ego pulls you back. My advice is to continue to be like you are now, genuine, and I hear a sanctity in your voice, like you're holding it to be sacred, and there's a depth the way you talk about these things. So continue to be deep about this, and you just recognize something that's so special and so liberating, and we are very, very lucky to have accessed the nature of our mind. Okay,
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm very happy for you, Michael. Just save all the tears that you cry into a bucket and remember them as a momentum. It's funny how people cry, people bust out laughing, all this stuff. To me, that's what makes all this so worth it. Just continuing to do it in our unorthodox way that we do it here. So you okay?
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna sit with that for a little bit after the call and see where that goes.
And it's here as we're speaking too, you know. Really begin to have a 24/7. That's what will happen. If your heart's in it, you're gonna have 24/7 spacious mind and access to this essentially, you know, now you can call it anything now that you've seen it. Uh, but it's always here and it permeates all experiences. All experiences are within the basis of this cognizant field. And that's why the fluctuations of our experience are just like water in a pot. It can be frozen, it can be boiling, it can be neutral. We can be mad, we can be sad, we can be happy, we can be excited. And it's only righteous this way. It's only fair this way. Because why would enlightenment entail something that's subject to our physicality? It just wouldn't make any sense like that. That means when you get sick and die, your enlightenment gets sick and dies. That's not the way it works. So, really, any experience that we have becomes evident as mind. And since it's mind, it's beautiful, it's pure. Even the so called ugly things that our society and our subscriptions train us to hate. And many of us, yogi scientists here, we see internal narratives and programming through this awareness. Otherwise, we wouldn't even see it because we're constantly doing the program and repeating the cycles, adding a little bit more code. But through awareness, you're no longer programming, you're no longer fueling, so the programming is exposed and liberated. And also, things that would trigger you normally uh, do not trigger you. They come and go. They're self-liberated. And everything is self-resolved within awareness, and that's really tough sometimes to trust. It's not shiny, as I say. Um, and we're used to doing stuff. We're used to having to fix this and being unsatisfied with something about ourselves or about the so-called external world. Or as a Dzogchen, you want to take radical responsibility for your environment, for everything in your world. Not in a sense of guilt or blame, but in a sense of my mind is involved in this. There's a reason why this book is in front of me, and these spices are in front of me. Um, my headlamp that's here, everything, right, is related to my mind. But what's key, where the secret lies, is that if we're going to say that it's a volumetric container of everything, a field truly that holds everything, well, then we must accept that completely. That no matter what the thoughts we're having, they're within awareness. No matter if we're raging out or sleeping, uh, it's within awareness. When we close our day and open our dream, um, it's within awareness. When we close our dream and open our day, it's within awareness. So there's a single baseline here, right? And, and just like a character in a dream, there's nothing in that dream that's real. The only thing that you can hinge on is cognizance itself. Where is that cognizance located? Vast spaciousness, Dharmakaya. It doesn't exist. Your awareness doesn't exist in any reference point. So now the dream character recognizes cognizance. Cognizance doesn't have a location, it's everywhere. And just by recognizing that cognizance and coming home into it, the dream starts to dissolve. Time, everything starts to dissipate into pure cognizance. And so that's why sometimes, I've said it's like a slow release acid trip. Depending on your stability, um, you'll see more and more magic. Okay. Wow. Well, I think we're gonna end like a half an hour ago. I forgot about that. So yeah. Any final thoughts? Figured I'd give you a lecture before you go. Everybody good? Yeah, me too. All right. It's the nest. I love it. Yeah, even if, believe it or not, people message me like, "I'm sorry I don't speak in the group. I'm shy," or this and that. I said, "No problem. Your presence is actually probably a lot of times more powerful than the words we're saying." There's this whole undermine going on. All right. Well, we'll do dedication then, okay? So through the gathering together of all these great yogis today, in the text that we read in the Dharma talk, there are beings in this very presence that are suffering, and we dedicate any realization, merit, and compassion to them. Kewa Magen Dodu Kunlan. Gewa Magen Dodu Kunlan. Gewa Magen Dodu Kunlan. Okay, please have a wonderful night and much gratitude, much love.